The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There is a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Yeah. Weird.
Okay, so picture this. Disney drops the bombshell news that they're making a live-action Snow White, and everyone's hyped. But then, plot twist, they cast Rachel Zegler, a Latina actress, as Snow White, and boom, the internet goes wild. People aren't just talking about it, they're arguing.
To a MAGA conservative movie. We're just trying to represent the values that Snow White is based in, the timeless values that we all loved growing up, that are sadly...
Why? Well, Snow White is one of Disney's OG princesses, based on a German fairy tale from like a million years ago. And in the story, she's got skin as white as snow. Hence the name, right? So when fans heard that Disney cast someone who doesn't match that classic image, it sparked a full-on debate. A princess for a new era, or too far from the original. Some fans were like, hold up, this is a German fairy tale. Why are we not sticking to that vibe? They weren't mad at Rachel Zegler personally. It's more like they felt Disney was trying to push for diversity where it didn't fit the story's roots.
But it's hard. And it's lonely. It's very lonely. I just know that if that loneliness can exist, so can other things, and I will be okay.
For these fans, it wasn't about race, but about keeping the character true to the folklore. Snow White is literally called Snow White because of her pale skin. So casting someone who doesn't fit that description, people were scratching their heads. And then of course, Twitter went nuts. On one side, you had people saying, it's 2024, who cares if she's not pale, it's time to shake things up. But on the other side, people were like, why change a character that's been around for nearly 200 years just to make a point about diversity? It's like taking a pizza and replacing all the toppings. Sure, it's still pizza, but does it feel the same? Why fans feel so protective? Here's the thing, Snow White isn't just some random Disney princess. She's the original Disney princess, the one who started it all back in 1937. For a lot of people, messing with her image feels like messing with Disney's entire legacy. Imagine your favorite childhood character suddenly getting a complete makeover. Yeah, that's how these fans feel. It's not that they don't want diversity, they just think this particular story, with its European roots, should stick closer to the original. To them, it's like if Disney did a live-action Mulan and made her British, it wouldn't make sense, right? Fans of the original Snow White think the character's ethnicity is a big part of her story, and casting someone who doesn't match, that feels like Disney's ignoring the history of the fairy tale. Is Disney going woke? Of course, there's the whole debate about whether Disney is just trying to be woke with this casting. Some people think the company's trying too hard to modernize everything and push an agenda. It's like, are they really trying to tell the best story, or are they just ticking off diversity boxes? For fans who grew up on the original Snow White, this casting choice feels like a huge shift away from the story they know and love. And it's not like Disney hasn't done diverse casting well before. The Little Mermaid with Halle Bailey got a lot of love. But Snow White? This felt different. It's tied to a specific culture, and for some fans, changing her race felt like rewriting history. Rachel Zegler caught in the crossfire. And poor Rachel Zegler. She's super talented, and none of this is really her fault. But she's stuck in the middle of this huge controversy. She's excited about playing Snow White, and she's done her best to handle the backlash with grace. But there's no denying that fans are divided. Some people are pumped to see her bring a fresh, new take to the role. Others, not so much. At the end of the day, this casting debate isn't just about one actress. It's about how we see these classic stories and whether they should evolve with the times or stick to their roots. It's safe to say that no matter how this remake turns out, people are going to have a lot to say about it. Rachel Zegler's response: owning the controversy with confidence. When the internet exploded with opinions about her casting as Snow White, Rachel Zegler did something that not many in her shoes would have done. She leaned in, and she leaned in hard. Instead of letting the whirlwind of criticism get to her, Zegler took the controversy head on, and trust me, she didn't shy away from addressing the elephant in the room. Rachel knew that the internet was buzzing, and she made it clear that she was well aware of the backlash. But instead of playing it safe, she showed some serious confidence. In multiple interviews, she didn't just respond to the controversy, she owned it. Rachel didn't come out with an apology or a defensive statement like some might expect. Nope, she made it clear that she's excited to take on this role, controversy be damned. She knows people have strong opinions about her being cast as Snow White, especially since the character has traditionally been depicted as pale-skinned and rooted in German folklore. but she made it clear that she's not going to let that stop her from bringing something new and fresh to the role. In fact, she seemed pretty pumped about it. Zegler stood her ground and basically said, "Look, I get it. People are attached to the original Snow White, but this is going to be different and that's okay." Her attitude was more like, "I'm going to make this role mine and you'll just have to wait and see." And if that wasn't enough, Rachel Zegler decided to stir things up even more by criticizing the original Snow White movie. Yep, she went there. In interviews, she called certain aspects of the 1937 classic creepy, specifically pointing out the love story between Snow White and Prince Charming. According to Rachel, the prince kinda gives off stalker vibes, and she couldn't wrap her head around why Snow White, this supposedly strong character, had to be rescued by a guy she barely knew. For Zegler, that storyline was outdated and didn't resonate with modern audiences anymore. She questioned the whole idea of Snow White being saved by a man and hinted that the upcoming live-action version would be doing things very differently. Rachel straight up said that the new Snow White wouldn't be waiting around for some prince to save her with a true love's kiss. In fact, she made it clear that the Snow White has no time for the whole damsel in distress thing. Instead of dreaming about romance or being rescued, the new Snow White will be focused on becoming a leader. According to Zegler, this version of the character is more about taking charge and fulfilling the legacy her late father left behind. She's going to be fearless, brave, and independent. Rachel was really passionate about this new direction, and she didn't hold back from sharing her excitement about it. She saw the modern Snow White as a symbol of empowerment, and she wanted to portray a princess who could inspire young women to chase their own dreams without relying on anyone else, especially a prince. Naturally, this didn't sit well with some fans. People were already upset about the casting, and now Rachel was publicly criticizing the original movie. To them, it felt like she was tearing down the very thing that made Snow White an iconic character. Many fans loved the traditional fairy tale with its themes of love and kindness, and they felt that Rachel's comments dismissed those core elements of the story. Some saw her critique as disrespectful to the legacy of Disney's first princess. The idea of ditching the whole true love's kiss thing felt like sacrilege to a lot of people who grew up watching the original movie. They saw it as Disney stripping away the magic and romance that made Snow White a beloved classic. But despite the backlash, Zegler didn't back down. She wasn't here to please everyone or to preserve the past. She was focused on bringing Snow White into the present. Rachel's vision for the character was all about strength, independence, and empowerment. She saw this new direction as a much-needed update for the 21st century, where female characters shouldn't be defined by their relationships with men. For Rachel, this wasn't about erasing the past, it was about evolving it. She wanted to create a Snow White that young girls today could look up to, not just for her beauty or for finding a prince, but for her courage and leadership. In her view, this wasn't just about being a princess, it was about becoming a queen. Rachel's unapologetic attitude, combined with her public criticism of the original movie, made her a polarizing figure. On one hand, some fans and supporters praised her for taking a bold stance, and for trying to bring something new to a story that's been around for decades. These people appreciated her feminist take, and were excited to see a version of Snow White that wasn't all about the prince. For them, Rachel was pushing boundaries and redefining what it means to be a Disney princess in a way that felt fresh and relevant. On the other hand, there were plenty of people who weren't having it. They felt like Rachel's comments were unnecessarily harsh, and that she was disrespecting the legacy of the original film. Some fans argued that just because the story was old didn't mean it needed to be changed so drastically. They liked the traditional love story and felt that Disney was trying too hard to be woke by making Snow White into something she was never meant to be. These fans saw Rachel's attitude as dismissive of the core elements that made Snow White timeless in the first place. But through it all, Rachel Zegler held her ground. She wasn't here to win over everyone, and she didn't try to water down her opinions to please both sides. Instead, she embraced the role with enthusiasm and a clear vision for what she wanted to do with it. In interviews, she expressed how excited she was to step into the shoes of a more modern, empowered Snow White, and she seemed confident that the final product would speak for itself. Rachel's message was pretty clear. This Snow White was going to be different, and if people didn't like that, well, they just have to wait and see how it all plays out. The Daily Wire's alternative, Snow White, but make it traditional AFSO, while Disney's live-action Snow White was busy making headlines for all the wrong reasons. Casting drama, Rachel Zegler, throwing shade at the original, fans losing their minds, the Daily Wire saw a golden opportunity. And trust me, they weren't going to let it slip by. Instead of just sitting back and watching Disney get roasted, The Daily Wire, a conservative media company known for going against the grain, decided to take matters into their own hands. That's right, they're making their own version of Snow White, and it's about as far from Disney's modern feminist reboot as you can get. Think of it like Snow White. Classic edition. No frills, no rewrites, just straight up fairy tale nostalgia. Why is the Daily Wire even getting involved? First of all, you might be wondering, wait, why is a media company that mostly does political stuff getting involved in the Snow White drama? Well, the Daily Wire is not your average media outlet. They've been dipping their toes into the entertainment world for a while now, trying to create alternatives to what they see as Hollywood's woke agenda. Basically, they're trying to bring back movies and shows that reflect traditional values, and, you guessed it, Snow White is now part of their grand plan. Here's where things get spicy. Fans who were upset with Disney's changes to Snow White, the casting, the feminist overhaul, and Rachel Zegler's critiques of the original started gravitating toward the Daily Wire's promise of an authentic retelling. And by authentic, I mean they're basically hitting copy-paste on the original Grimm brothers fairy tale and bringing it to life, without any of the modern updates. No woke casting choices, no feminist reimagining, and definitely no prince being called a stalker. This is the Daily Wire saying, we'll give you the real Snow White you grew up with, no revisions. Sticking to the OG formula. So what's the Daily Wire's version going to look like? In a word, traditional. They're promising fans that their adaptation is going to stay true to the source material. You know, the original Snow White with all the old school fairy tale elements, princesses in distress, charming princes, true love's kiss, and all that jazz. They're making a big deal about how their version won't have any of the modern feminist twists that Disney is bringing to the table. In fact, they've openly said that they're sticking to the classic love story, complete with the prince saving the day and Snow White dreaming of her happily ever after. And honestly, for a lot of people, this was exactly what they wanted. Fans who felt betrayed by Disney's decision to stray from the traditional storyline were thrilled that the Daily Wire was stepping in to offer what they saw as a true Snow White. For them, it wasn't just about watching a movie. It was about preserving the nostalgia of the original fairy tale. These fans weren't interested in seeing Snow White become some fearless leader or questioning the romance. They wanted the comfort of the old story, with all its timeless values. Think of it as the Daily Wire swooping in like a knight in shining armor to rescue the princess from the clutches of Disney's modern agenda. The ultimate rebound for traditional fans. To the fans who were turned off by Disney's choices, the Daily Wire became the ultimate rebound. They were like, oh, Disney wants to mess with the classics? No problem, we've got your back. And let's be real, this was a smart move on the Daily Wire's part. There's a huge audience out there that's fed up with what they see as Hollywood's constant need to reinvent the wheel. They want their fairy tales the way they remember them. Simple, straightforward, and yes, a little cheesy. For these fans, the whole point of Snow White is that it's a fairy tale, not a statement about female empowerment or social justice. And the Daily Wire knew exactly how to tap into this sentiment. They started hyping up their version as the anti-woke Snow White, a movie that would take fans back to a time when fairy tales were just fairy tales, not political messages. This wasn't just about telling a story, it was about making a statement. By creating their own version of Snow White, the Daily Wire is pushing back against what they see as Hollywood's constant need to make everything woke and progressive. They're basically saying, not every story needs to be updated for 2024. Some stories should stay the way they were meant to be told. Rachel Zegler versus the Daily Wire, the showdown. No one saw coming, so now we've got this weird, unexpected showdown between Rachel Zegler's Disney Snow White and the Daily Wire's old school reboot. It's like a cultural tug of war, with two totally different visions for the same story. On one side, Disney's taking Snow White into the modern world, giving her more independence, more power, and a feminist spin. On the other side, the Daily Wire is doubling down on tradition, keeping Snow White as the innocent princess who dreams of love and relies on the prince to save the day. Fans are already picking sides, and it's kind of turned into this whole Team Disney versus Team Daily Wire situation. The debate goes deeper than just who plays Snow White. It's about what people want from their fairy tales in general. Are we cool with updating them to fit modern ideas about gender, power, and identity? Or should some classics stay classic, untouched by today's social movements? Rachel Zegler has definitely taken heat for being on the wrong side of this argument, depending on who you ask, while the Daily Wire is being hailed as the savior of fairy tales by fans who feel Disney is losing its way. It's kind of wild that a simple casting decision has turned into a full-on cultural debate. but here we are. Is this the future of fairy tales? So what does the Daily Wire's version mean for the future of fairy tales? Well, it looks like we're entering an era where we'll have two very different types of these stories. The modernized, socially conscious versions, like Disney's Snow White, and the throwback versions that stick to the original tales, like the Daily Wire's adaptation. It's kind of like having two lanes to choose from. If you want the princess who fights for herself, Disney's got you covered. But if you want the princess who's saved by Prince Charming, well, the Daily Wire is here to deliver that. No matter which side you're on, this whole Snow White battle has shown us one thing. People care a lot about how their fairy tales are told. It's not just about entertainment anymore. These stories are loaded with deeper meanings about culture, tradition, and how we see the world. And honestly, it looks like this debate isn't going anywhere anytime soon. One thing's for sure, when both of these Snow White adaptations finally drop, it's going to be the showdown of the year. Will Disney's feminist twist win over new audiences? Or will the Daily Wire's faithful retelling bring the nostalgia-loving fans back to the theaters? Only time will tell, but you can bet we'll all be watching this play out.